Fox 35 News at 5 starts now.
So, Matt, what was the situation with Verizon today? What was the problem?
So, I mean, Verizon hasn't said exactly what happened yet or caused it, but reports started at actually around 9 a.m. Eastern, and they're still continuing, even though there's less of them. But they did confirm they had some sort of a service outage. Seems like the worst states hit were like Georgia, Arizona. It was kind of state by state, which is kind of interesting, in East and West Coast. I think even some Chicago. But people were basically unable to make calls, sometimes unable to make texts. In iPhone's cases, they were saying they were in SOS mode, which basically means the only thing you could do is make an emergency call, which would use another network. So there's still no reasoning, but it seems to still be ongoing, although it's getting better.
It's days like these that really kind of highlight just how much we rely on these things, isn't it?
It really is. Obviously everyone panics. And what's funny though, I think a lot of people didn't even know it was happening because if you had a Wi-Fi network or you were making Wi-Fi calling, you didn't necessarily notice it. So in some cases, you may not have even noticed. But yeah, if you were expecting an important call or a text message, you were waiting all morning and it just never came through. But yeah, it really does show how much those things on our hands are called our lives, are really so important to our lives.
And so, what should people do? What is something that people can do to, I don't know, give you some sort of redundancy if something like this does happen? Because I know so many of us, speaking for myself here, this is my only way to make calls. I don't have a landline at home.
Yeah, so if all the whether Android or Apple, any of these phones have Wi-Fi calling on them. And I think by default, nobody uses it. It used to be something you'd use back when service wasn't as good as it is now on different networks. But with the Wi-Fi calling, as long as you have a Wi-Fi signal, you can still make a call. The only downside to that is if you're at your house or your office and you walk outside and lose that signal, you actually will drop or temporarily drop your call. But that'll give you phone calls. Regular SMS messages, there's not necessarily much you can do. The Apple iMessage can actually still work potentially over with an iPad or whatnot. But for phone calls, that's what you can do. And then there are messaging apps that I know a lot of people use, things like WhatsApp and whatnot. Those could still work. But again, the SMS, not a whole lot you can necessarily do on that.
And this is just something that it seems like customers have to deal with from time to time. And I mean, it wasn't that long ago we were talking about an AT&T outage, Verizon today. I mean, is this just part of it?
Unfortunately, it sort of is. I mean, it kind of goes back to with how great phones and technology are. Obviously they can also really ruin your day or longer. I think it's just that you have to have some way of knowing. Phone calls are still a necessity, but maybe there's other ways to get in touch, that just knowing other ways around it. But you would hope these large carriers don't have problems, but you also have to remember, even though there's no saying what happened here, they obviously still have network issues, they still make mistakes, and unfortunately they're still a target of cyber attacks. They're still, again, we don't know, but that's the biggest part you always have to be worried about, is if this was a cyber attack. That's always at least my bigger worry.
Yeah, certainly a lot to think about there, and talk about something that creates tech rage when you have an outage like that. Am I right, Matt?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that really resonates, especially with this kind of a thing happening. So.
All right, Matt Rose, CXO of Tech Rage IT in Winter Springs. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me.